Alright, it's been months since episode 3, for which I hope you can forgive me. The last episode got almost no traction at all, which was disheartening. I focused on other projects and frankly, Homebrews Season 2 fell out of my mind. Especially with the Star Wars x Warhammer 40k series making waves. But I gave my word that I would finish this series, and frankly, I waited too long to get back to it. Which again, I hope you can forgive me. If you want to show support to this series, like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, the whole shtick. You know what to do. Links to my Patreon, Ko-fi and Discord server are in the description below. With that out of the way, let's begin. The first homebrew of today is a character created by one of the oldest friends of the channel, Hayden Lumpkin. His name is Gaskar Khan. The Great Father, Admiral of 1,000 Nests, the Unifier, Void Prophet, Dervish of a Burning Wall, Bearer of a Tauva, and many more titles. Gaskar is the current Khan of the clan Tauva-Khani and the official leader of all Pavukhani in the Eastern Fringe. Hatched from a disgraced matriarch at the dawn of the Great Migration from Imperial space, he deeply remembers the pain and hardships his species suffered in Exodus, and sought to never have such a fate befall his species again. Through hard work and time, he would rise again through the ranks of Pavukhani society, eventually achieving the rank of Khan in his diminished clan. Soon after, he was approached by the watercaste diplomats of the Tauva coalition. He initiated sparse trade and secured safe harbor within their borders. They also offered, in secret, support in his conquest in exchange for his undying loyalty. A decision from his youth that still haunts him to this day. He accepted the offer and would enact vengeance upon those who wronged him and clemency to those who bent the knee, adopting those who were willing as their father Khan, all in accordance with coalition design. In time, he would unite all clans that were within his reach, but the crown of leadership would weigh heavily upon a troubled brow. He was well aware of how depraved his species may become if they are desperate, as well as self-destructive excesses of the matriarchs were. He knew that it was time for a change, for evolution that will save his kind. Thus, he encourages cooperation amongst the clans and specialization through aspects of the caste system, inspired by that of the Tau. But the same action meant to save his people made him an enemy of traditionalists who seek to undermine his authority. While a believer in philosophy of a greater good, he is wary of delusion of his people's spirit, fearing that without his guidance, the fate of his species will be decided by the Tau, turning them into nothing more than puppets when he passes from the world of the living. Gaskar is forced to walk a narrow path between the mighty warlord Khan of his people and a noble servant to the greater good, into an uncertain future. Regardless, he still clings to hope for the better future of his species, and by the grace of the Void Father, he shall see that future a reality. By his will, Pavukhani will prevail. He is a respected admiral and master of hit-and-run tactics, as well as piracy in accordance to Pavukhani customs. He is exceptionally rare among the Khans because of his scholarly pursuits, such as language and religion. He claims it grants him advantage over his prey, but it is in equal part a way of honoring his mother and expanding his knowledge to find a way to secure the future of his people within the coalition. He carries himself with the bravado of a barbarian king, but is smarter than he lets on, yet can be quite prideful with the image of his species and himself. I think that's a great characterization for a tragic leader who seeks to bring new era to his people. A character that I am very tempted to use in the Star Wars X Warhammer 40k series, now that Damocles' Ghoul Crusade rewrite is on hiatus. Next creation comes from Kongaro. We leave the Xenos for the moment to see a new Space Marine chapter, Angels of Honor chapter. Because there wasn't much lore written about them, I allowed myself to add some information, though the core remains that of what the author created. They are a very young Ultramarine successor chapter, one that is barely a century old in fact. Many believe they are a fleet-based chapter, but in truth they do have Fortress Monastery. Its location is kept secret, even to the majority of the chapter. Only chapter master, captains, librarians, and chaplains know its true location. From what little information that exists, it seems that the chapter monastery isn't on any planet, or even star system. Current unconfirmed theories speak of asteroid in deep space, or a rogue planet flying through the void of Segmentum Ultima. How chapter's fleet and command structure remains in contact with this monastery remains a mystery to all observers. Angels of Honor traverse Segmentum Ultima, helping worlds that call for the help or hunting threats they deem dangerous enough. By tradition, they take orphans from saved worlds to be added into the ranks of Astartes. They believe that those with no attachment to mortal families and raised by their own will and determination are better stock than those raised by families or noble blood. Their current chapter master is Fortis Kongaro, more than 250-year-old warrior, who in the past was a member of Ultramarine chapter. Found as an orphan by sergeant of a 3rd Company, he was made into Space Marine and served in 3rd Company with distinction. Later on, he was sent to the Death Watch, where he served for decades, until he returned to the Ultramar with a strange Xenos creature by his side that was under his care by the Order of Ordo Xenos of the Emperor's most holy and devout Inquisition. Several years after his return, a new founding was announced, and Fortis Kongaro was selected as one of those who will be part of this newborn chapter. Not long after, he was elected to the position of chapter master and held this position since. Many speculate that the origins of the mysterious xeno-animal companion and true location of the chapter monastery are connected, especially because of seemingly close ties between the chapter master and a section of Ordo Xenos. It's not clear how that came to be, but several other bizarre alien animal companions were noticed in the company of Angels of Honor Battle Brothers. Many are of the conviction that the entire chapter is nothing more than a semi-secret pet project of unnamed Lord Inquisitor, who seeks some kind of advantage for the Imperium in the bound between strange xeno creatures and Angels of Death. As I said, I allowed myself to add some background and drama to the creation, but I see it as appropriate since they are Space Marine chapter with freaking Pokémons. Anyway, next homebrew comes from Hello UB8KT, another Xenos species. Dyscori'i. And as you can see, they are a sapient elephant-deer mix, one of the minor factions of the Keshi cluster, which most definitely wasn't heavily inspired by game Kenshi and half a dozen other post-apocalyptic games and settings. Anyway, they are the victims of interrupted xenocide by the Divine Empire, and somewhat resentful puppets of a Tau and Hip. Though, to be fair, they live far better lives in modern age. Physical traits. Type: roughly mammalian. Average height at the shoulder: 2.2 meters. Average length: 2.9 excluding head, 3.2 including head with tusk curled in, 3.5 with tusk extended. Reproduction: live birth, 11-month pregnancy. Lifespan: 120 Terran years. Maturity: 20 Terran years. Senses: relatively poor vision reaching viable depth perception. Trichromatic vision covering a spectrum from around the upper third of what human eyes register, as well as into low UV. Excellent and relatively directional smell. Good hearing with a low frequency, and capacity to hear footsteps or echoes helped by seismic senses through specialized fatty structures in each foot. Diet: omnivorous, bordering on herbivore. Coloration: light brown with dark green and bright purple markings in patterns that vary individually. Other traits: while quadrupedal with no true hands, they have 3 single-nostril trunks with considerable dexterity. The Dyscori'i are also fully heteromorphic species, typically undergoing female metapause between 54th and 65 Terran years and male equivalent 10-12 Terran years later. Homeworld: Dyscori'i. A remarkably verdant world near the edge of a Keshi cluster, with relatively high gravity and low average surface temperature, balanced by the majority of its land area taking the form of 6 largely elongated-looking continents clustered near the equator. Such that apart from one wide gap, it's relatively short sailing distance from each to the next. This shape, some suspect, may not be coincidental. While the Dyscori'i never developed metalworking, thanks in part to their world having been heavily mined then abandoned by an unknown civilization a few million years in the past, leaving little easily smelted or worked metal on the surface. They had otherwise relatively well-developed set of societies, with large-scale agriculture aid in many regions by carefully planned and coordinated irrigation and very refined craftsmanship using ceramics, stone and plant materials with occasional use of bones and leather. They experience intermittent wars between the several dozen kingdoms, republics and other small nations and hundreds more independent clans across the equatorial continents. Their population was around 250 to 300 million when shifts between the local anomalies made their homeworld readily accessible by the rest of the cluster, and the Divine Empire began a war of conquest that had a degree of initial success and left millions dead, but was interrupted as part of the coalition campaigns in the region, followed by rebuilding and integration efforts. The Dyscori'i Commonwealth is a representative democracy where all the higher offices are explicitly restricted to certain social classes in several stratified layers and leaned into ties with the Hip up to and including inviting them to set up enclave in the Color Mountain regions and on Polar Continent on their homeworld. Primarily to somewhat limit the need to deal with influence of a Tau, who many see privately as both dangerously power-hungry and excessively cold-blooded. So while nominally autonomous, they live under political influence from both in various ways, with the Tip holding somewhat more overt influence and economic ties, with the Tau exerting influence through technology reliance and potential colonization efforts. Dyscori'i religion is primarily animalistic, with some cultures incorporating the worship of largely regional gods, and a slowly growing presence of cults dedicated to the goddess Tau-Va. Despite their large size and strength, Dyscori'i are not used as auxiliaries by the coalition. The warriors of the species were found difficult to work with and not as efficient in warfare as other members. As such, their role was limited to local Keshi cluster garrisons. I think this is quite a neat little concept for an alien species. Quite unique. There are too many humanoid species, in my opinion. This one is different enough to make you think how they would work as a society. And that's it. The great return of your Homebrews Season 2. Next I will be working towards Mass Effect vs Warhammer 40k video, as well as another episode of Star Wars X Warhammer 40k series. Until then, stay tuned and stay safe out there.